So coming up this weekend is going to be UFC Fight Night, Ribas versus Namajunas, and I do think it's going to be a better card than the one that we just had, Tabura versus Tuivasa. Now, I do understand that the name value for this card overall, I would say, is probably a little bit lower than the Tuivasa card, aside from the obvious being Rose Namajunas in the main event, one of the most popular female MMA fighters in the world right now. She is in the headliner, but aside from that, you do look through the card, and there really isn't some pretty well-known names throughout the card, but I do expect this one to be a lot more fun. I mean, there's fighters on this card that are going to get finishes. There's a lot of fights on this card that are going to finish inside the distance. I do think it does make for a pretty hard card to predict, but overall, I think as a viewing standpoint, it is going to be a very, very fun fight to watch and sit back and enjoy. But if you did want to get financially involved, you can use the We Want Picks Artem 3-day free trial promo code to get access to everything to We Want Picks. You get to see Angelo's bets, you get to see Jacob's bets, and then you get to see the DraftKings optimizer, the AI as well that they've got in there, and just a lot of other things for 3 days for free. Aside from that, it is of course $10 per month, but you can cancel during that 3-day free trial period when you do use my code Artem. And with all of that being said, let's go down all the way to the bottom for the first prelim of the night. Mohammed Usman is going to be opening up the card against Mick Parkin. This could be a good one. It could also be a not so good one. I mean, Mohammed Usman, he's been in some good fights. He's been in some pretty bad fights as well. His fight against Junior Tafa was a little bit unfortunate, really. Like, you know, it was just kind of him laying and praying on Junior. I'm going to bring up FightOdds.io right now because I thought that Tapology would have odds up. But anyway, Mohammed Usman, I think that he can potentially out-wrestle Mick Parkin here. But the thing about Mick Parkin is I feel like he has actually already proven to be a pretty decent level heavyweight. He is a guy that I was not very high on at all at the start of his career because he was not fighting the best guys at all on the regional scene. In fact, he had never beaten anyone with a winning record until he came into Dana White's Contender Series. But since then, he has really impressed me. You know, he took on a guy that is a wrestler in Jamal Pajuelo, and then he just took on another grappler in Kai Machado and is able to beat him up too with his boxing. I think technically he's going to be the better striker than Usman. Of course, Usman has proven to have one-shot KO power. He knocked out Zach Pauga to win the Ultimate Fighter recently, and then of course took on Junior Tafa where he showed off that wrestling. He took on Jake Collier. I thought he looked pretty bad against Collier, to be honest. It wasn't really the best fight. It wasn't the best performance. Mick Parkin, though, I think that he's going to pressure Usman backwards on the feet, using that boxing, get Usman up against the fence where he's not going to be able to effectively shoot for his takedowns and take the decision here. I'm going to pick Mick Parkin here. I do think he's going to be able to get it done over the motor Mohammed Usman, and I would assume that Mick Parkin is going to be the favorite going into this matchup. He is minus 150, so Mohammed Usman being plus 130 on the money line. Maybe Mohammed Usman could be someone to look at, like an inside the distance, decision no action sort of play. I'm not too sure what the odds on that could be. They could be pretty wide, but we can move on. We've got two prospects from Brazil taking on each other. Now, a lot of people usually don't like it when they do this, but I feel like they do fights like this, where the winner will all of a sudden probably get a pretty big promotional boost from the company, and then the loser, they can kind of think, oh, hey, maybe we need to slow build him, or oh, hey, maybe he's not as good as we thought. But this is actually a fight between two really good guys, and it is kind of a shame that this one in particular is happening because Igor Severino is 8-0, and he's also 21 years old. Not even 21 years old. This guy is younger than me by about 6 months or so. That makes me feel really great about myself. But anyway, Igor Severino, 8-0, not even 21 years old, become the Jungle Fight champion, I believe, as a teenager, which was very, very impressive. Went out there against Jonata Silva, a former men's strawweight, and looks really good against him, knocked him out in the second round. But Igor Severino, he's got good grappling as well. I thought he was going to just be able to dominate the much smaller fighter in the grappling on his Dana White's Contender Series fight. But he struck with him, looked really good on the feet. But I don't think he's really going to be as good at striking as Andre Lima is, because Andre Lima is a very, very good kickboxer. And I almost want to say, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that he had a kickboxing career prior coming into MMA, because his kickboxing is really, really technical and really, really smooth. And his takedown defense and his grappling defense has actually developed quite well alongside his MMA game overall. Okay, Topology's not going to load for me, unfortunately. But Andre Lima, he's had good performances. You know, he took on Rixon Zenadim. I didn't think that was his best performance. I actually think he has looked a lot better in the past, where he has actually struggled a little bit with the grappling, most notably in his LFA fight, but then he comes back to get the knockout. I think his striking is going to be much better and more technical than Igor Severino's, and that's why I think he's going to be able to get it done here. I think that he will win the fight. Most likely a decision. A KO really could happen here because Igor does leave himself just a little bit open, being that shooter box aggressive style. But I do like Lima to win the matchup. The odds makers, I believe, also like Lima to win the fight. At -175 and Igor da Silva is +150. Now we can move on to Monsterrat Rendon taking on Darya Zheleznyakova. Very low confidence pick for me here, because Monsterrat Rendon kind of proved me wrong in her last fight, because I did pick Tamiris Vidal to beat her, and then Rendon won, but even then it was a pretty unimpressive decision, I guess you could say. And then Darya Zheleznyakova was recently signed, and she of course did lose to Melissa No Mess Mellons in that matchup where she was TKO'd in the very first round, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was 4 minutes 59 seconds into the first round. And if you ask me, I think that was actually a pretty controversial stoppage, and she was beating up Melissa Mellons prior to that. Zheleznyakova, of course, she can grapple, but for the most part, I would say she probably is a bit more of a striker. She was beating up Melissa Mellons before Mellons got on the ground, got on her back, and was able to pound away. And then I would say that it was a pretty controversial stoppage there in that situation. Rendon's kind of an odd fighter to me. She's 6-0, 6 decisions. She's a striker that can mix in takedowns, but she's looked pretty bad in the past. Like, Brittany Cloudy, split decision win, and then, like, split decision win over a 2-1 opponent 2 years ago. It's just weird, you know? But the thing about Rendon is she is actually quite big for the weight class at 135. She does have a lot of muscle as well, which she was kind of able to overpower Vidal in some moments in that fight. I am picking Zheleznyakova. I actually think she's really good. Her striking is good. She has power. She was beating up Melissa Mellons, who I think is also a pretty good prospect as well before she got out-grappled. I don't think Rendon's wrestling and grappling is going to be good enough to really expose Darya's potentially massive weakness there. I see Zheleznyakova being able to get it done here. I think she's just going to do more damage. You know, Rendon, I just don't know how to feel about Rendon. She's 35 years old. She's had close fights with poor fighters in the past. I would definitely pick Zheleznyakova to beat Tamiris Vidal, for example. So that's why I'm going to be going with her here. The odds do favour Zheleznyakova, even though the Topology votes do not. She's -170, and Rendon is, of course, the underdog around +140. And now we've got Stephen Nguyen taking on Jarno Errens. And in this matchup here, it almost probably is something like Jarno Errens is fighting for his spot in the UFC at this point. I do think Stephen Nguyen's a really good boxer, and I think he's a better striker than Jarno Errens is as well. I know that Jarno Errens was able to get the knockdown against Seungwoo Choi in his last matchup. Topology, please just load for me. I know that Jarno Errens was able to knock down Seungwoo Choi in his last matchup, but I do think that Stephen Nguyen's striking and his boxing in particular is probably good enough to kind of just avoid those big strikes that Errens does have. Errens, for the most part, I would say is mostly strong in the clinch. That's probably where I would say he finds a lot of his success. But I think Nguyen, for the most part, is going to use his range that he does have at 145 pounds. Use that 1-2 that he likes to throw over and over and over again. That's one thing I've noticed about his game. And I think he's going to be able to keep Errens at the end of his boxing range and keep Errens in trouble. And I think eventually he might be able to break Errens to find a finish. But Errens is a tough dude, and he's going to be a hard guy to finish. So I'm going to go with Nguyen to win by decision. In this one here, Nguyen did look really good on his Contender Series fight against Cunningham, but we know now that Cunningham is definitely not a UFC caliber fighter. Jarno Errens was signed on short notice to fight William Gomez in France, and it is kind of cool that he's in the UFC, because he does add quite a lot of international flair to the company, being from the Netherlands. I think he's the only fighter from the Netherlands, but maybe it's just a little bit too much too soon for Errens. I think Nguyen, he is the real deal. He's been inactive though. You know, I don't really know what he did for 2 years, but here he is. I like to see it. I like Nguyen. I like him by decision. He's -210 right now. I thought he was like minus 250 at one point. Interesting. Money must be coming in on Errens. I think a lot of people are liking the fact that he knocked down Sungwoo Choi potentially. But I do think that the range that Nguyen does have, I know that they've got the same reach, but Nguyen does use his jab very effectively. And I think he can box from range in this matchup. Now we've got Miles Johns taking on Cody Gibson. And I really want to pick Cody Gibson, because I think Cody Gibson, although he's almost 37 years old, I think he's a really fun fighter, and I'm very happy that he's back in the UFC. Of course, he got back into the UFC by being in the finals of the most recent Ultimate Fighter season, where he took on Brad Katona, and he did lose a pretty close fight, where he set a very, very fast pace. I mean, that was an absolute war. Went out there in the first round and won the first round against Katona, but then just wasn't able to keep up the pace, and the two put on a very fun fight, which was unexpected because I thought Katona was just going to wrestle and it was going to be a pretty boring performance overall with a win for Katona. But Gibson really brought it to him, man. And, I think that Miles Johns is a tough guy. That's the problem with Cody Gibson being nearly 37 years old. They're not going to give him any layups. They're not going to do him any favors in matchups. And I know that Miles Johns is taking this fight on short notice. Gibson was originally meant to be scheduled to fight someone else that I think would have been, I've got no internet now, awesome, I think would have been a better matchup, to be fair, for Gibson. I can't remember him off the top of my head, but I think Johns is going to be a tough fighter. Johns is coming off that win over Dan Algueda, which was recently overturned, and then it turns out that I believe it was a drug test that Miles Johns, I actually looked into it, he had an elevated level of something, but then USADA kind of lowered the regulations, but they didn't overturn the win, something along those lines. Miles Johns is a good fighter, though. He's a good wrestler for the most part, which is where I think he is going to have the biggest advantage over Cody Gibson. And I think on the feet, Miles Johns is definitely capable of standing in there with Cody Gibson. Of course, Gibson is massive for the weight class. He's tall, he's lanky, he uses his range pretty well as well. But I think that Johns, he's shown to have pretty good cardio in the past. He beat Dan Argueda, who is a pretty tough matchup. Very good wrestler for the weight class. Morales is a good wrestler as well for the weight class. I think he's going to be able to get his own offensive wrestling going, especially against Cody Gibson, who is a very good submission threat. He is a good grappler, but I think that Johns should be able to get him down. I'm going to pick Johns by decision, but Gibson could make it interesting. He's got power on the feet. He's got range. He's got that submission threat as well, especially off his back too. Be interesting to see what happens, but I think that Johns is a pretty big favorite in this matchup. Gibson would be a fun underdog to pick, but I just can't really find myself picking him, and I can't find the odds. There he is. He's only minus 130 as Miles Johns. Minus 120 on some sports books. Wow. Seems like a lot of people are giving Cody Gibson a lot of respect in the matchup. I do understand it, but I do think Miles Johns will be able to get it done. And now we've got Ricardo Ramos taking on Julian Erosa. And I'm just going to have to go from the screen until my internet comes back. I'm going to be picking Ricardo. Sorry, no, I'm picking Julian Erosa. Sorry, I was picking Ricardo Ramos for a long time, and then I recently switched it. And the reason why I was going to pick Ramos is I feel like we might just be kind of seeing a little bit of a decline, unfortunately, for Julian Erosa. Julian Erosa, he's been KO'd in his last two fights. Got KO'd by Fernando Padilla, where he did take a little bit of damage. Got KO'd before that as well. And it does kind of seem like maybe the chin just doesn't really have too much mileage left, because he has been KO'd multiple times in his career as well. But Ricardo Ramos was just lost recently to... I can picture his face. He's from Canada. He just lost to him, Charles Jourdain. He got submitted, I believe, by Charles Jourdain in the first round. And that was where Ramos was meant to have the biggest advantage in that matchup, because Ramos is a wrestler. He is a grappler. But of course, you've got to wrestle to get the fight down to the ground. And he's a pretty good Muay Thai striker as well. Erosa at one point was on a really good run until he just got KO'd a couple of times. I believe Alex Caceres' head kick was one of them. That was a really nice KO, though, for Caceres. A very sneaky head kick from Caceres, actually. Pretty hard for Erosa to have seen. But I think he's going to be the better striker over Ricardo Ramos. I think Ricardo Ramos, he's going to have to get the fight down to the ground. But even then, Erosa isn't a guy that doesn't know how to grapple. Erosa's got a lot of submissions in his own right. He's got good defensive grappling as well, even though he has been finished before. Ramos as well was coming off a big layoff. I don't really know why he took so much time off. I do like Erosa to win this matchup, and I do like Erosa here. I was picking Ramos for a while, though, and Erosa's actually the underdog at plus 140. What are the votes actually looking like? Erosa's only been picked by 27% of people. Okay, if you are on Ramos, let me know. Maybe it's just for the same reason, that it seems like Julian Erosa's chin might not have an unlimited period of time left. Now, Trey Ogden is going to be taking on Kurt Holobaugh, and I'm going to be picking Kurt Holobaugh in this one here. I'm going to assume that Holobaugh is the underdog. It must be pretty close odds, though. Let's have a little look-see here. He's plus 120, plus 126 or so on some sports books, and Ogden is around minus 140, minus 150. I like Holobaugh, though. I like Holobaugh in general, man. He's kind of a guy that has not been in the UFC for a long time. He's been fighting a bit, obviously, and then got the opportunity for the Ultimate Fighter, and did surprise me a lot. I didn't pick him to win the whole season. I actually think that 138 MMA picked him to win the whole season when it originally came around, and he definitely shocked me. You know, he got taken down in the first round, I believe, in the fight, and then got a submission off his back against a fighter who is now in the UFC at 145, whose name I also can't remember. But Kurt Holobaugh got a submission early on the show, and then he got another submission as well, again in the finals against Austin Hubbard, where he had a very good performance on the feet as well, because he's a very aggressive, very dangerous guy. He's big for lightweight. He's dangerous on the feet because he's got KO power. He's dangerous on the ground because he's got a really good grappling edge as well. But overall, you know, I think that he's going to be more dangerous than Trey Ogden, because Trey Ogden's not a guy that's finishing people. He does have a lot of submissions. He's got no KOs. Most of his wins are by decision. I know he's got a black belt in BJJ in his own right, but I think that Holobaugh, on the feet especially, is just going to be the much more dangerous fighter. And although Ogden has shown that he can have a lot of success on the feet, because of course he beat Daniel Zheleznyakova in that striking matchup, which was just crazy, to be honest. It was very, very unexpected, but then since then he has lost. I think Holobaugh is going to be able to give him problems on the feet and problems on the ground, just because he's so dangerous everywhere. So I am going to be picking Kurt Holobaugh here, and I'm assuming a decent amount of the Tapology groups are picking him as well. 66% are picking him, even though he is the underdog. I think a lot of people just kind of agree with me, just the fact that he's so dangerous, and Ogden just isn't. The next fight will be Luis Pajuelo taking on Fernando Padilla. This might be another unpopular pick, but I am going to pick Fernando Padilla in this one here. I think that Luis Pajuelo has a lot of holes in his game, and to be fair, maybe Fernando Padilla isn't going to be the guy that exposes those holes, because Padilla himself was exposed a little bit in his last fight. I go to the odds. I'm assuming Pajuelo is actually the underdog here. He is, because Padilla is minus 170. Pajuelo is plus 145. But I'm assuming a lot of people are picking Pajuelo. They are. 62% of people are picking Pajuelo. If you actually really go through and look at Luis Pajuelo, I don't think he's going to be technical enough at 145 pounds to really make a run up into the rankings. Whereas Padilla is still a young guy, still a young up-and-coming guy that really might have the opportunity to do something. Pajuelo, you watch him. He's massive for 145. He looked huge against Robbie Ring on his Dana White's Contender Series fight. And he's just a brawler. He fights like Trevor Peak. He's not very technical. He likes to come forward. He likes to pressure. And he likes to throw hooks. But aside from that, his technique really isn't that great. His grappling still is a little bit of a grey area. Whereas Padilla has shown that he does have pretty good technical boxing. And he can grapple as well. Of course, he did lose to Kyle Nelson, if I'm not mistaken, in his last matchup, which was a pretty bad look. But Padilla, I feel like against a guy like Luis Pajuelo, although he's super dangerous, he should be the much better striker technically. He should be able to avoid those bombs. He should be able to chip away from the outside, and he should be able to get the takedowns and the grappling going as well, because I'm very confident that Padilla is the better grappler than Pajuelo. Pajuelo is a very strong guy. I'm sure because of that strength that he does have, that base that he does have, he's probably going to be pretty tough to take down just in general. But I think Padilla is going to be too good in the wrestling and the grappling not to try and exploit that. Even then, on the feet, I know that Pajuelo is going to be very dangerous. I still think that Padilla is going to be the much more technical striker, especially in that boxing department. He styled on Julian Erosa in a very good come-out party sort of matchup when he was making his UFC debut after a long time away. I think he gets it done over Pajuelo. I just don't think that Pajuelo is going to be technical enough to keep up with Fernando Padilla. And now the next one will be Billy Q taking on Youssef Zalal, who's going to be coming in on very short notice. Of course, Youssef Zalal was in the UFC in the past. He then went to a draw against Damon Blackshear and was released. I know he's fought at least once since then, and now he's going to be coming back against Billy Q up a weight class, because Zalal is typically a bantamweight. I'm pretty confident Billy Q is going to be able to turn away Youssef Zalal. Billy Q is a guy that's borderline ranked at featherweight, a guy that has proven to be a very good featherweight. I believe he was ranked at one point when he took on Enson Barboza. And Youssef Zalal, although I think Zalal's actually really good, he's a good wrestler, he's a good boxer as well, he can strike in his own right. I just don't think him coming in up a weight class, he's going to be really good enough to deal with Billy Q, because Billy Q can do it all. He can strike, he can grapple, he can wrestle, and I think in this one here, he should be able to get it done over Zalal. I like Billy Q in this matchup here. I think he's going to be able to keep it on the feet if Zalal wants to take it down to the ground. There was a lot of wrestling in the Damon Blackshear fight, but of course, that was initiated by Damon Blackshear in that one there. On the feet as well, Billy Q's just going to be the much bigger fighter. I just can't see Zalal coming in at 145 and matching the size of Billy Q, because Billy Q is pretty big for featherweight in general, taking on a natural bantamweight. And I just think in general, Billy Q is going to be able to do what he does best. I think he strikes from the outside and finds a lot of success. I think Zalal as well, he has gassed out in the past. Short notice, Zalal could gas out as well. I think that Billy Q is going to be able to look quite good and get a finish in round 2 or 3 is going to be my prediction. I like Billy Q to win at this matchup here. I'm assuming most people are picking Billy Q. There might not be odds for this one as it was announced relatively recently. If I do look here, Billy Quarantillo, only minus 150. Wow, people are not respecting Billy Q, I guess. I guess it's because he hasn't looked his best recently, but I really do think he should be able to turn away Youssef Zalal in this fight. And now we've got 2 young prospects going to be fighting each other. Peyton Talbot will be taking on Cameron Saaiman. On the main card here, a pretty big opportunity for both guys to really make a name for each other. But I like Peyton Talbot in this fight, and I like Peyton Talbot a lot as a prospect. A lot of things about Peyton Talbot remind me of a younger Sean O'Malley, and I really think if the UFC keep giving him smart matchups, and to be fair, this isn't one of them, but if the UFC keeps giving him really smart matchups, he really could go on a pretty big run like O'Malley, just kind of finishing a lot of guys that are kind of at the bottom of the rankings at 135, creating a pretty big record, creating a pretty big name for himself, garnering a bit of a fan base, as he definitely will attract a pretty specific type of people, to be fair, because he does seem to be very heavily into anime. I'm not too sure how much of an anime MMA crossover there is. I'm not into anime at all, so I couldn't tell you, but Talbot seems like a guy that would appeal to a lot of people that may potentially also watch the UFC, or may not, which could be a good thing too. Talbot seems like a guy that definitely could create just a big fan base like O'Malley has managed to do. Cameron Saaiman, though, is of course coming off that loss to Christian Rodriguez, who has managed to spoil the party for so many people in the UFC. Saaiman is good though, man. Saaiman, he started out as a grappler, as an amateur, and then become a really good striker. And then he showcased a lot of that grappling again in the UFC. Of course, we have seen it against Stephen Kozlow. Showed us some incredible grappling against him. Showed us some incredible grappling as well. And his most recent win, which of course I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm trying to go through a whole card without having any visuals whatsoever. But Cameron Saaiman, he's a pretty good striker, but for the most part, I feel like, and Terrence Mitchell, he beat Terrence Mitchell, dominated him on the ground. He's going to be the one that wants to take this fight down to the ground. Talbot is a long, rangy striker, like O'Malley, and his takedown defense in the past has looked really, really bad, but his takedown defense on Dana White's Contender Series looked absolutely incredible, and then his takedown defense in his UFC debut looked really, really good as well. It's kind of interesting, because it's obviously something that he's worked very, very hard on, because this guy on the regional scene before Contender Series was getting taken down by absolutely everybody. He was getting taken down over and over again, but you just pop right back up every single time, and then he would absolutely smoke them on the feet, every single one of them. Saaiman, though, is going to be probably the best grappler, the best grappler for sure that he has fought. Maybe not the best pure wrestler that he has fought, but definitely the best grappler that he's fought. So it'll be interesting to find out how good Talbot's grappling is if this fight does get down to the ground. On the feet, though, I do like Talbot. I do favor Talbot in this matchup. I like his range. I like his power that he shows. He can be hittable, but that's just kind of part of how he sort of fights. He's got a very interesting fighting style. He's got good power. Saaiman really could make it dirty by closing in the distance with the boxing, shooting for takedowns. Of course, if Saaiman gets it down to the ground, I would highly believe that he is the better grappler in this matchup. As I said, 100%, the best grappler that Talbot has had to fight in his career. It'd be interesting to see if he is going to be able to do that, or if that's even the game plan. But yeah, I think that Talbot does get it done. Another prospect versus prospect matchup, and another really fun fight. Edmund Shabazian is going to be fighting AJ Dobson in this one. And I'm picking Shabazian, and I'm pretty confident in him. I'm seeing a lot of people kind of maybe thinking about Dobson, kind of thinking that there's no chance of Shabazian winning, which is kind of interesting because he has looked bad recently. Talbot is the favorite in that last matchup, by the way, and Shabazian is around like minus 200 in this matchup, so he's a pretty big favorite. But I think he gets it done. AJ Dobson's one of those guys that, of course, come in off the Contender Series, and he hasn't really impressed me too much. Of course, he got his legs absolutely kicked out from underneath him against Arman Petrosyan. Sorry, Arman Petrosyan absolutely lit up those legs, absolutely kicked those legs out from under him. I've got Wi-Fi again. We're back. We're back in civilization. And AJ Dobson got his legs kicked out from underneath him from Arman Petrosyan. He can wrestle. That's what he's tried to do in the past. And he has had some mixed success. He is coming off that win over Tafa and Chukwi, but that fight was pretty bad, to be honest with you. But it probably did save his career. Shabazian's coming off that loss, of course, to Anthony Hernandez. But that was an absolutely nightmare matchup for him. And Hernandez is a really, really good fighter, man. Dolce Nguyen was his comeback fight for Shabazian, and he was able to get it done, but Dolce isn't really UFC level, unfortunately, even though a lot of people like Dolce, and he fought some really good fighters before coming into the UFC. Shabazian in this matchup, which I think is going to be a mostly striking matchup, should be the better striker. Shabazian at one point was a ranked fighter, and you still kind of do see some of the skills that got him there in the first place. His takedown defense should be enough to deal with AJ Dobson. I think he's the much better striker. I think he should be able to get it done. Give me Shabazian. Give me Shabazian by KO. I'm pretty confident in him. So why not pick him to win by KO in this one here? And now we can go from a pretty high confidence pick to a very low confidence pick. And this is almost going to be a hard one to explain, but you're going to have to bear with me. I am going to pick Justin Tafa. And a lot of people are going to say that there's bias there, and of course there probably is a little bit, just because I am a massive fan of the Tafa brothers. Absolutely massive fan of the Tafa brothers. But I like Carl Williams as well. Carl Williams is a really, really nice guy. The UFC has done quite a few bits of him on his YouTube channel. He's a nice guy. He responded to my Instagram DMs quite a few times, and I was just kind of messaging him when he was getting into the UFC. And he's a nice guy. He's a great guy. And, yeah, I'm going to pick Justin Tafa to beat him, though, to be honest. Like, Carl Williams is a guy that shocked me more than once, to be fair, especially on the Contender Series. He come in here on Jimmy Lawson, who is a former D1 wrestler, college wrestler, and was a guy that was just knocking everyone out silly at heavyweight. And at this time, Carl Williams was not a heavyweight. He was a light heavyweight that come in after fighting at 205 pounds on short notice, moved up to heavyweight on short notice, and then just dominated Jimmy Lawson in the wrestling. Come in again as a heavyweight and was able to take down Lucas Bursky and beat him there. But on the feet, Bursky was once again still able to have some success in that fight. And then he beat Chase Sherman, but Chase Sherman is Chase Sherman. Justin Tafa is a good fighter, man. If it was Junior Tafa, even without the short notice fight against Marcos Rogério de Lima, I was picking Carl Williams with a lot of confidence. Junior Tafa's takedown defense is clearly not ready for the UFC heavyweight level wrestlers. Justin Tafa, I think, is. And I think Justin Tafa... See, I don't know if I really believe what I'm about to say, but I am going to say I think Justin Tafa is the more patient striker out of the two strikers. I actually do believe that Junior Tafa is the better striker out of the two, and the reason why I say that is because Junior Tafa is a former top 10 Glory kickboxing heavyweight fighter, and he's really good, but the problem is Junior Tafa, since he's come into the UFC, he's impatient. He leaves himself wide open. Justin Tafa is the opposite. Justin Tafa is patient. He waits for counters. He makes reads. He thinks. He sits back and he thinks and he waits. And he waits for opportunities where his brother, Junior, would come through swinging and just leave himself wide open for takedowns. Justin's not going to do that. Justin is going to take his time. He's going to wait for his openings, and then he's going to land his big shots in the counters. He landed a massive, massive left hand over... I thought it might have been an overhand right. Must have been a left hand. I watched it live. against Osterlane. Anyway, the point is he knocks out Osterlane with a huge shot, knocks out Parker Porter with a massive shot, and then Junior knocks him out, of course. But I think, once again, Justin Tafa's takedown defense is better than Junior's. I think he's proven that as well to be true. He's stronger than Junior because Junior is a light heavyweight that just eats a lot of pies, to be honest. And Junior Tafa's even been teasing a move to 205 pounds. In fact, his MMA debut, Junior Tafa's MMA debut, was meant to be a light heavyweight fight on the Contender Series in 2021, I want to say it was. Maybe 2022. It was a long time ago, anyway. Justin Tafa, though, I think he's better at keeping the fight on the feet, and he's a better striker than Carl Williams. I almost want to say by far, I think he's a much better striker than Carl Williams, but you can take a lot of similarities to this matchup with Jimmy Lawson, because Jimmy Lawson was a big boy, like Justin Tafa, who weighs in way over the heavyweight limit. Man, he's a big boy, who knocks people out silly, and that's what Justin Tafa does. But Tafa, I know for a fact, he's been working on his wrestling heaps. He's got a blue belt in BJJ, which probably isn't really great for UFC level BJJ, but he is a good grappler. He's better than his brother in the wrestling and the grappling. I think he keeps it on the feet. I think he knocks out Carl Williams, man. Carl Williams, I think, is the real deal. And if he beats Justin Tafa, then Carl Williams is a guy that I would say, hey, let's just try Alexander Romanov. You know, let's get him up there. I like Justin Tafa, though. Seems like the majority of people like him as well. I can respect that. Carl Williams would have beaten Junior Tafa, I would say, relatively easily. Justin Tafa's a different story, and Justin Tafa you can get for plus 200 apparently right now. I mean, damn, Justin Tafa by KO round 1 must be playing out. Like, that's big bucks. That's Lamborghini money right there, potentially, for the bad man. I do like Justin Tafa. And now we've got Amanda Ribas taking on Rose Namajunas. Jacob from We Want Picks is going to be incredibly excited for this matchup, but I'm going to be picking Rose. And the odds for this one here have Rose at minus 180, Amanda Ribas at plus 150. I am picking Rose, but I don't feel good about it, man, because I think Rose isn't even 32 years old. And I think Rose... I think we're seeing the end of Rose Namajunas' MMA career. I do. I think that all those years with Pat Barry have really added up. Like, they must have really added up, because living with Pat Barry for so long, like, you watch an interview for half an hour and you get uncomfortable. Rose lives with that man and has lived with him for most of her life at this point, which is a bit uncomfortable to say, but anyway. Rose Namajunas, okay, so she loses to Carla Esparza in the worst fight in UFC history, arguably, and then in between that period of time, she goes for a grappling match against Julian Robertson, and loses, and then in the interview just says, I just wanted to see where I'm at, and just doesn't really care, like it's not a big deal that the former strawweight world champion just lost to Julian Robertson in a grappling fight, which is fair, but she lost in like 90 seconds or 40 seconds or something very short. It wasn't very good to look at, and then she goes out there against Manon Fiorot, and to be fair, has a pretty close performance, but Fiorot does manage to edge her out at 125 pounds, and now she's back against Amanda Ribas. And the reason why I think that Rose Namajunas, although I do genuinely believe that we are kind of going to the end of Rose Namajunas' career, is on the feet, she's just going to be so much better. So much better. Rose Namajunas, she started out as a grappler, and then her striking really developed into something really good, because she beat Zhang Weili twice. And Jessica Andrade as well. She also beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk with her striking too. And Amanda Ribas, like her striking, like I saw a highlight video of Amanda Ribas, and she's just throwing punches like, this is going to sound so bad, but she's just throwing punches like someone that hasn't really been, like, she doesn't throw punches straight, like she's throwing them like this, like from her shoulders, you know what I mean? It's just like, or even like this sometimes, it's just like really, really sloppy striking, and she runs forward. This is what she does on her offense. She's running forward with her chin up in the air, and she just throwing punches, like, and Rose Namajunas should still be, at this point, even though I do think that she's getting towards the end, should still be a good enough striker to at least land really nice counter shots on Amanda Ribas in this fight, because Amanda Ribas, she's incredibly aggressive, but man, she leaves herself open. I mean, of course, she got finished by Macy Barber because she leaves herself open on the feet. She's got no striking defense whatsoever. She's incredibly aggressive. She does go for takedowns, but Rose Namajunas, is a good grappler. She started out as a grappler. She has been one of the better grapplers at strawweight for a very, very long time. Has proven that. She is a former champion. One of the greatest female strawweights of all time. One of the greatest female fighters of all time. Although you look at the record and you wouldn't believe it. She's beaten, I believe, every single woman strawweight champion there has ever been, because she's beaten Zhang Weili, she's beaten Joanna, she's beaten Carla Esparza, and Jessica Andrade. She beat her as well in a 3-round fight quite a few years ago. But man, I just don't know, man. Like, I just don't know. Cause of course she got just like what's going on with Rose Namajunas, man? It's such a mental thing with her because she's so unpredictable, and I feel like that's just the effect of Pat Barry. That's the Pat Barry effect, man. I feel like you guys know what I mean if you know what I mean. But Ribas leaves herself so open. I know she got that really sick spinning wheel kick over Luana Pinheiro, but Luana Pinheiro, she's not going to be a champion. Now she's fighting a former champion. Araujo, old, like 37 years old. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm going to pick Rose Namajunas. I'm going to pick her to win. If it's prime, if she comes out like prime Rose, she should be able to knock out Amanda Ribas, but I'm just going to pick her to win by decision. Just because Ribas leaves herself so open on the feet. Like, Rose Namajunas is going to have so many opportunities to land really good strikes on her. So give me Rose by decision. Of course, Rose is the favorite. Of course, Jacob from We Want Picks is going to be picking Ribas, and there are reasons to pick her. Like, I really wanted to pick Ribas. I thought about it just because I think that Rose, I just don't know if she's really into it anymore. I don't know if she loves it anymore. This move to 125 I think is really questionable because she's not big. Wait, no, this is at 115. No, it is at 125. Okay, Ribas fought at 115, but she's going to be the bigger fighter anyway. I think the move to 125 is just really weird, to be honest. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. I can't see Namajunas beating Shevchenko. I can't see her beating Grasso. I can't see Rose Namajunas even beating Manon Fiorot, who she's lost to. I even think Erin Blanchfield, although that would be a potentially good matchup for Namajunas, might be able to get past her as well, just kind of based on her size alone. And even then, there's still some really good fighters. Like Natalia Silva versus Rose Namajunas would actually be a pretty interesting matchup that I think you would still have to pick Rose in, but Natalia would be a pretty like interesting pick. I don't know. I just feel like there's just fighters, man, at 125, which she won't be able to get past. So it's just a really weird, it's a really weird move, you know, because with Namajunas, after she lost to Carla Esparza, all she really had to do was maybe fight Mackenzie Dern, and then she could maybe get another title shot. Who knows? It's just, I just don't understand what's going on with this fight in general. Just 125 Rose, like why? This card overall, name value is not there, but man, the fights are going to be fun. Trust me on that, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.